You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Hello and welcome to TFM's Local Watering Hole. I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and I'm so excited to be here with globetrotting, amazing person that she is, Christy Morris.
Hello. Yes, I have figured out the way around the lasers. I've got my red dress on, and I don't know anyone at this party. Just letting you know, I don't know anyone.
Well, I think you might know this one person who's here. Scott, it's been a while since you've been back.
I know, and I was supposed to be back a whole lot sooner, and then I had to go and get a stupid stomach bug. So, boo hiss.
Oh.
Yeah. It was really, I know you were really frustrated with that because we were going to be talking Dune with you, and you had to miss that. But, you know, thankfully they've greenlit Dune 2, so you could be on that show.
Oh,
so that's fantastic.
I fear is the mind killer. I will do my best to be there. as long as the bacteria doesn't come after me next.
I was about to say we might need fear is the stomach bug killer. So that might be what we need, but but I'm so excited to have you here because we're going to be having some fun tonight as we dive into what has been touted as Netflix's most watched movie, which nobody knows what that means because
Netflix doesn't want you to know what that means, because all that matters is that they can say it and then we believe it, and it's a big deal because they say it. It's how streaming works, folks.
You mean it's more watched than Kissing Booth?
I don't know. I guess I've never heard of Kissing Booth.
Or To All the Boys I've Loved Before.
Oh, I love To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I love that entire trilogy. Don't you slander To All the Boys I Loved Before. I legitimately enjoy that trilogy so much.
No, I did too. I'm just saying, I'm kind of surprised it's more watched than that.
I just have to say, before we even dive into anything at all, it just, it goes perfectly with today's mantra, which is just reality distortion. You just say a bunch of words that don't necessarily mean anything, but they get people all excited. So, I mean, that's exactly what Netflix does when it tells us that it's their most watched movie ever. Okay, whatever that means. So, who knows how many people actually watch things? So you're saying that more people watch this than something else that you had, which we don't know how many people really watch. So that's great. Thank you so much for telling us these things.
Or was it just one person replaying it over and over and over to increase the view count?
You know, a question I always have is not only is it about is it how many households, even a household can have multiple profiles on a Netflix account. Like if different people watch it on the different profiles, does that count as a separate view, or because it's technically all under one account, is it just the one account? These are questions that I ponder late at night when I have nothing else better to do.
Which, yeah, exactly. So, well, before we dive into talking about Red Notice, we want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's listening. We really appreciate everybody who does. If you like the show, a few things you can do to help out. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. That way you get the shows as soon as they drop. You'll get the bonus shows as soon as they drop as well, especially as we're actively putting out Assembling Avengers right now. And we do have a special episode coming out of Snyder Cuts very soon because, we've got to talk about Army of Thieves there. So you can look forward to that. Of course, you can also find us on all the social media platforms out there. We're on Twitter at the 602 Club. We're on Instagram at the 602 Club TFM. You can also, of course, find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. There's a listeners-only discussion group you can join there called Babel Conference, where you can talk to people from all over the world listening to the shows. And, of course, you could find us online at trek.fm, where got the entire website devoted to everything going on the entire network. So all of those places you can find us. And if you like the show, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to Patreon to make sure that the network can continue to bring you all of this great content. And, we do it without any ads. So the only ad you're going to get is to please help us out over at patreon.com/trekfm. And if you want the network to continue and for us to be able to even grow, that's the only way that's going to happen. So again, that's patreon.com/trekfm. So Scott and Christy, we spent, I guess, 2 years in and out of our homes very infrequently, really. And so movies coming out on things like Netflix and is a big deal. It has become more of a big deal. So when you saw that they were going to do a movie with Gal Gadot, as well as Ryan Reynolds and The Rock, all in one movie, were you guys excited?
You know what? I looked at it and went, this is going to be fun. Like, I don't know if the word excited really fits, but I was intrigued and I was like, you know what? It's a $7 production. You got those three people and it's a Netflix movie. And let's be honest, when you talk about any kind of direct to streaming film, the threshold for me wanting to watch it is incredibly low because, well, who cares? It's there. And it even if it looks mildly entertaining, I'm gonna watch it. And what I was told was I've got a heist movie, which is already a genre that I have adored for decades. With those three, it's gonna be fun. So why the heck not? And I think that's kind of my attitude going into it was, why the heck not?
No, I think that's a perfect way to summarize it, because I think they were capitalizing on that probably with it being direct to Netflix. They're hoping that even if people aren't overly thrilled about it, that at least they've got the actors to pull them in and they've got the streaming audience that is more willing to click on pretty much whatever. So, yeah, but I was interested. I admit I already follow The Rock and Ryan Reynolds on social media, so I knew when this came out before I even saw a trailer or anything. And I don't think I ever actually saw a trailer other than I saw that they were doing this movie.
It's interesting because I was definitely intrigued, and I think, it just goes to the fact of who it was going to be in the movie. I mean, you put these three in a movie together, and I think that immediately draws you in. And the reason that you get these three people to be in a movie, because it immediately draws you in a way that, I can't say that every, thing that comes out on Netflix that I even know comes out, because there's so much content that's coming out these days. It's really hard to keep up, honestly. Like, I get lost in the sea of content that we have coming out on all of these platforms. And it seems like every day there's a new streaming service coming out claiming to have, the newest, greatest shows or movies. And so putting that all together, I think they wisely did something here to which would get people to recognize, oh, okay, this is happening on Netflix, and you put these three stars who are social media savvy, and you're probably going to capture an audience, and apparently the world's largest audience for Netflix ever. Biggest numbers. Well, we don't really talk about numbers, but biggest audience ever. So, I thought it was really interesting, though, that this movie was obviously meant to come out earlier than it did, and it was delayed because of COVID. And I wanted to ask both of you, with that in mind, did you feel that at all in the production of the movie, that this maybe in some ways isn't as high production value-wise as you might have expected if they hadn't been delayed and hadn't had to shoot, basically during the height of COVID?
Well, I'd say for me, there were only two things that I really noticed production-wise that stood out that were bad. I don't know if you could tell, but I think probably all of us could tell. The bullfight scene
Yeah.
was definitely in front of a green screen.
Yes.
And I gotta say, jumping ahead a little bit, I didn't love some of the filming style.
I'll piggyback off of that because it was weird for me how there were portions of the film that I thought the filming style was like really kinetic and energetic. And like, I think of the beginning scene at the museum where Ryan Reynolds is like escaping, and it almost gave me like a Michael Bay-esque, like the way Bay can make the camera make the image feel like momentum. And then there were other times where it's like that wasn't there, like the fight between the three of them in the arms dealer's like little private museum. It's like, wow, there was wildly inconsistent energy here. And so that's all I felt. Now, you know, otherwise it just felt like, okay, I'm watching I wouldn't even say a quote Netflix movie, because I feel like that gets thrown around. It's like, what does that even mean? Because I've seen wildly different kinds of movies, you know, Netflix originals that are either Netflix just bought it or no, Netflix actually made it. And I don't feel like I feel like people throw that around because they think it's an easy insult. And, you know, yes, there are movies that Netflix puts out that were lower budget, but I can also see movies like that in the theater. This one felt like a weird hybrid in the middle. And I don't know if that's COVID. I don't know if that's the budget that Netflix allowed for it. I don't know if it's this director. I've never heard of this director before. So like, I don't know what to assign it to. I just feel like they were making this movie and maybe COVID affected it. Would I be, you know, it's kind of like a cool little what if. What would this movie have looked like if the pandemic hadn't happened? I don't know. I will admit it didn't strike me as watching it. I wasn't like, oh, they did this while COVID and I can see the things. Like I've seen productions where it's like, wow, this is what you were filming before COVID hit. This is what you were filming after COVID hit. And I could tell, like series, I could tell that. This movie, I really didn't like, it didn't strike me. So I thought it was interesting that you put that in the show notes, because I was like, I hadn't thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was something that I really felt, you know, and I think you're right, Scott. A lot of times you get thrown around the whole idea, oh, it's a Netflix movie. And I think when people say that, what they mean is that by saying it's a Netflix movie is the new way of saying, oh, it's made for TV movie. That, you know, it's a made for Netflix movie. and that's kind of the connotation that we have now. And, you know, in some ways, some of their movies very much have that, and then some of them don't, you know, and it really just depends. And I feel like this one, to me, probably would, I feel like, have felt less like that if it hadn't been filmed during COVID, because there were too many places where I felt like you're in a minimalistic set, you're using a lot of green screen here, and the actors aren't really in a lot of the locations that they're supposed to be in. And it's not even like the quality of like the Void, you know, from Mandalorian, where you can't tell the difference most of the time. Here, there were plenty of times where I could feel that they weren't where they're supposed to be. And I think specifically, you know, obviously the bullfight, it's terrible. It's really, really bad. I've seen better CGI in video games, you know, kind of thing. And I think, you know, you both rightly called out, like, there's this weird thing where some scenes feel like they have a really nice kinetic energy to them that the, you know, the movement of the camera and everything's bringing. And then other times everything kind of feels flat, which you're kind of surprised at, especially when it's one of your big scenes where they're all fighting, you know, in that collector's art gallery room, you know. So I you know, I think you can definitely feel that they only get basically a week to film in Italy. And that's pretty much it. The rest of it, this is all, stuff that's it feels like it's done more on a stage, which is where you bring in your star power. Like you want this movie to kind of be put over the top by the fact that you've got Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot. And so I wanted to ask both of you, how do you feel like these stars do then in this movie when this is clearly a film that is being driven by star power? Like if they don't show up, this movie is not going to work for anyone.
The hard part for me is that I love all three of them, and I worried initially that it was going to be too many A-listers in one movie. But I think that the problem is more that they're each really playing up the kind of tropes, I guess is the word I would say, that they're each known for doing every time. Initially, like I'm saying, I love the Deadpool version of Ryan Reynolds with his humor and stuff, but I feel like now it's become his thing where he does that in every movie he's in, where it's that, sarcastic humor kind of thing. And The Rock is there to be the muscle and the, most recognizable, I would say, I think, of the three of them. Although he gets a little bit to surprise the audience at the end, which was nice. Otherwise, it's kind of predictable for him, too. And then Gal, I thought she was great, but I wish that they kind of gave her character more challenge, because it felt a little to me like everything was easy for her until the waterfall scene, whereas the two of them actually, the guys went through more struggle as characters.
You know what, Christy, that's really interesting, and I have to say that in retrospect, I agree with that. What you said about Dwayne Johnson, which is about Ryan Reynolds, nailed it. They're playing themselves, or at least they're playing the characters that they have of late played in like every movie. And you could argue, but that's what you get them for. You get them to be Dwayne Johnson. You get them to be Ryan Reynolds. I will admit that Gal was the one who, this might be a little hyperbolic, but I'm going to say impressed me the most, because I thought she was the one playing against what I'm used to seeing her as. Like, this was one of the first times I've seen Gal in a movie that I felt like she was having fun with it. Like, she got to be playful, which is not something that, of what I've seen her in, which is mainly Wonder Woman and Giselle from the Fast and Furious movies. I mean, I haven't seen Keeping Up with the Joneses, and I don't know what other films Gal has been in, like, because we're still waiting on Death on the Nile to come out. But this one was like, she got to be a little Bond villain. And it was a fun twist for me watching her doing that. And so I felt like of the three of them, she was the one that I felt like I was watching something new from her.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I agree.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree with either of you more. I do think it was interesting because what Dwayne Johnson doing here is basically what he does in the Fast and Furious movies, for the most part, like his character. And, Ryan Reynolds is just doing the most classic version of Ryan Reynolds you can get, which is to try and be as funny as possible with every single line that he says. And everything is a joke. And it's... I do agree with you, Christy. I think especially with him, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's tired. Like, it's just not funny anymore. And because it's so expected, there's nothing unexpected about it. And so I would love to see him, like, really try and do something that stretches him as an actor. And I believe he could do it. And even Dwayne Johnson, the same thing. I would actually, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think I'm excited maybe to see his Black Adam, because he's going to get to do something different, I think, hopefully. And
fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. who knows what's happening with the DCEU these days. Anyway, but that's a whole other story. Gal, though, like, I think you're right. Keeping Up with the Joneses is probably the closest to this role that she's had, and somewhat similar, except I do feel like here she's just kind of being and getting the opportunity to play a character who kind of revels in their badness and their, like everything that goes along with that. She is enjoying her sexiness. She's enjoying the fun and the mayhem that she's causing. She's enjoying causing pain to others, a little bit like Xenia Onatopp from Goldeneye,
right, yeah.
Like that's the kind of character she's playing. And I think you are absolutely right, Scott, that she's the only one here who actually feels like she's having a lot of fun with this role and not really caring about how great she is or anything. Like, she's just kind of enjoying it, where I feel like the guys here, it's like work. Like, they're working to be funny. They're working, whereas Gal is just kind of, it seemed like she just threw caution to the wind and she just had a great time. And, I wish, in many ways, I wish the guys had taken a page from her book and did that, and because I really do think that she was the one who I found to be the most enjoyable to watch on screen, and not just because it's Gal Gadot, because the other two guys are great looking too. So it's not like I don't enjoy watching all of these people on screen.
This is just beautiful, sexy people on screen for like 2 hours.
Exactly. 3 good-looking people doing a heist. Okay.
Right. So it's not like that's the point. It's just she was just much more magnetic on screen, which is strange to say with those other two actors who normally that's their MO. And yet, I think part of what we're saying is that their MO has become so much their MO that it's actually just kind of boring now. Like, we want something else from them.
Yeah, and that's hard for me to say, I will say, because Ryan Reynolds, especially, when he first did that kind of humor with Deadpool, it was different. And it was a whole new side to Ryan Reynolds where we were really getting to see something where he was pushing the envelope. But then if you do that same caricature in every movie following, you're right. I mean, it gets a little tired and too expected, and he needs to do something that shows more range again. Like Free Guy that we talked about. That was different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because in that way, too, with that movie, it's more earnest, right? He's playing a more earnest character, one who doesn't have that kind of like completely cynical edge again that we've seen before. So, yeah, it's just kind of frustrating.
I did want to add in one person that we didn't mention that I wanted to say was great was Ritu Arya, who was the Interpol agent, Das, that was chasing them. I recognize her from Umbrella Academy.
Oh, nice.
And she's actually done a lot of stuff. She apparently was in Sherlock, Doctor Who, all kinds of stuff. So I thought she was really good in this role too. And I thought that she brought a lot of fun to her role, even when it could have just been, she's like the hard ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I thought that she seemed to be having fun as well in this role, which again, I think was kind of important. And in many ways, I think it kind of goes to what this movie is in every sense of the word. It's 90s fun. Like, this movie is so much a 90s movie.
Thank you
I think
so much for that. Because
I think that's kind of what Gal got, right? Like, that's what we're going for, is that kind of over-the-top, ridiculous, Michael Bay type of action. I mean, this feels like, and I'm stressing this, it feels like the original Transformers movie that he did, where it's that type of thing. That's what they're going for here.
Here's what I was doing watching this movie. I'm sitting here going, this is like the National Thomas Crown Entrapment of Doom. Like, because it was like, I'm sitting here going, it's like National Treasure, yes. The Thomas Crown Affair, random Indiana Jones movie thrown in at the end. You know, it was just this weird thing of like late 90s, early 2000s heist movies that I'm like, I'm going to be honest, we're like my bread and butter. Like, I love all these movies. So there's a part of me that appreciates the tropes. Like even the Interpol agent, like literally I just watched Army of Thieves with one. It's like, oh, it's like John Hamm from The Town, or like anytime you've got like the beleaguered cop who's like chasing the charismatic leads, it even at some points has sort of a Ocean's 11-esque-ness to it. Like it's literally just name any heist movie from the late 90s and early 2000s, and you saw inspiration in this movie. And like you said, Matt, like for me, like the whole Ryan Reynolds chase through the museum was very Bay, which was funny because, you know, last year or the year before, I was watching Ryan Reynolds in Six Underground on Netflix, directed by Michael Bay.
The less said about that movie, the better.
Oh, come on. That was like Bayham 2.0. That was Bay at his bayest.
It was, and that's what made it the worst. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
But I loved it. But that was kind of like, I'm not sure if that was something that made it charming or that was something that made it feel tired, or I was charmed and tired at the same time, because it did feel like, take Thomas Crown Affair, take Entrapment, take National Treasure, take a random Indiana Jones movie, throw them in a blender, and we got this movie. And that's one of the situations where it can be a pastiche and you are charmed by it because you're getting something familiar but fun, or you get bored by it because it's been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And I feel like I felt both of those feelings at different points watching the movie.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, because there's definitely moments where I'm really excited about it. And it's like that nostalgia brings you back in of all of the movies that you love so much. I mean, heck, they had a bridge falling sequence. They're in the jungle trying to get find something on a treasure map. It's all of those things together. But yeah, I think ultimately for me, I lean a little bit more toward wanting more from it plot wise. It did feel like it was the greatest hits, but no punchline.
Yes. Very well put.
That is a fantastic point, Christy. I think that's exactly what this movie is that it has the veneer of everything that you guys just mentioned, and yet it's kind of like the hollow chocolate bunny at Easter. You know, you're like, oh, right. There's no chocolate in there. It's just this facade of chocolate. But
where's the cream filling?
Exactly. So I think like you said, Scott, when you remind us of all of those movies, then it's like the thing where you're just thinking to yourself, why am I not just watching one of them?
Yes.
Instead of this. And I think that's where if you are going to play in these type of tropes, you really have to make sure that you create something that doesn't make people wish they were just watching what it is that you're basically ripping off. And I think, watching this, and Christy, I like that you bring that up. Like, the storyline here is, it is basic, you basic. It's there's nothing here that is it, all the twists and the turns you're expecting, because they're not doing anything to surprise you. And that kind of just leaves you like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense. Like, I think that's the thing.
Like the fact that Gal Gadot says, what was it she says to Ryan Reynolds toward the end? She's like, you thought that I was going to go to Egypt? I was just waiting for you to lead me here. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't new.
No, yeah. And I think it's one of those things, and we kind of touched on this obviously at the beginning, but I think that's one of the things as well where then I would say that the production value where, it didn't help the movie. It didn't, because it wasn't as high quality as you would have wanted. They spent $160 million on this movie.
200.
Yeah, there you go. $200 million. That's when it ballooned to. It's like, on what? Like, the stars and some bad CGI? Like, you can make... The Mandalorian makes incredible episodes of television that look better than this. Like, maybe you should have just hired them to, like, create your, visual movie. It was strange.
But yet, when Netflix touts, how many people have watched it, there is a part of me that looks at it and goes, I understand why. I mean, there is, not everyone watches a movie like we watch a movie. Like, I like movies personally that I can watch multiple times, that I can get something out of it after every showing. This is very disposable. It is, I watched it. It's basically like eating a bucket of popcorn. I kept eating and I kept eating and kept eating. And eventually I'm like, where the hell did my popcorn go? And that's kind of like watching this movie where you kind of go, well, where did the last 2 hours go? But that's what some people want, especially what you mentioned, Matt, in an era of, I can't keep up with all the content that is being thrown at me. It becomes sort of this, great, I need to watch something. This is something that looks mildly entertaining. Was I entertained? Yes. Cool. For a lot of people, that checks the box and they can move on to the next thing. If it's forgettable, who cares? Because I at least entertained myself for the 2 hours that I was watching it. Not everyone needs it to stick to their bones. And so that's what this movie does. It's popcorn. It's a candy bar. It's not the apple. It's not the steak that's going to, satiate you and stay with you for a while. It's just the fun little empty calorie snack that, got me through this period of my life. And then I get to move on to the next thing. I can keep on munching. And honestly, it's something that streaming does. It's like, cool, I watched it. I move on to the next thing in my queue. And
I love the food comparisons. I'm going to do that now with everything.
But it really does work. It really does make sense. And yet, I think sometimes, like, did I think this was a particularly great movie? Absolutely not. Was I entertained by it? Sometimes. But yet, I understand the type of person who really got a kick out of this, but then we'll never talk about it again. But they'll remember it as being something that was really great simply because it entertained them for the period of time that they watched it, and that's all they need from it. And no judgment about that, because I have family who falls into that category, who I talked to this movie about. And but it serves them, and that's also why you get high viewing numbers, because, let's be honest, there's more people like that in the world than people who want to, like, swirl their wine and like smell it and like swish around their mouth, it takes them 5 hours to drink one glass of wine. Like, that's not your normal consumer of movies. So, sorry, the food comparisons. Now all I'm thinking about is I'm making food comparisons.
You're like, now I'm hungry.
Oh, right.
Well, I think that, you're 100%, valid in that point, because that is what a lot of people end up wanting. But I do think on the other side, it's one of those things where I watch a movie like this and then I'm reminded as to why I don't care to keep up with, all of the stuff that's coming out, because it's just not I mean, most of it's kind of this, empty-headed entertainment that it isn't worth the very little time that I have, And so it's like there's that flip side where I'm reminded of like, yeah, there's all this content coming out on all of these streaming platforms, and this is probably more representative of the fact that most of it, you could take it or leave it. Like, you watch it, it's not going to have any impact. You don't watch it, it's not going to have any impact. Like, so I do wonder, like, and I didn't put this on the outline, but I just think, to me, that this is indicative of where we are with all of this in streaming, in the sense that I think we're at the point where less should be more, instead of the other way around. And I'd rather have quality versus quantity. And right now, all we got is quantity. Like, and there's very little quality. Now, there is quality out there. Don't get me wrong. There's quality out there. Zack Snyder's Justice League is quality. Like you get those. Yeah, you shush. You get the rare moments but you get those rare moments of quality, like where you watch something and you're just kind of blown away by it. But on a whole, that's probably not the case with most things. And so, I don't know. I guess part of me, like watching this, I was like, dang, man, we're just in this place where there's so much stuff being thrown at us. And, I wish I felt like more of it actually mattered, in the long run. So,
but okay, devil's advocate, but at least if you're not someone who feels compelled that you have to watch everything, at least there's this myriad of choices, and at least there is a myriad of choices for me to go. It's like the buffet. I can go, yeah, I'm not going to grab the crab salad. I'm not going to grab the casserole over there, but boy, am I going to like load up on the pasta over here, because this is something that I'm going to enjoy. And I think it's like, I want to watch this movie for the exact reason we talked about at the beginning. It's a heist movie, and it's got Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot. Mm-hmm. Like, that's all I needed. That's all I needed to make me go, this checks some boxes for me. This put it on my I'm going to watch it list. And there's other movies that come and go that's like, yeah, I don't need to watch that, and I don't feel any compulsion. But there's going to be somebody else who that checks some boxes for. And I think that's why you got to look at this. It goes, this checks some boxes. And and whether you personally find it entertaining or not. And like I said, it's a mixed bag for me. There's somebody who thought this was just wonderful and great. That's who it's made for. Because something that I'm going to go over here and watch, I know someone else is not going to enjoy, but I'm glad it was made. And let's be honest, streaming services feel compelled to make more content. I don't understand the idea of I always need something new. Like, that's what I keep on getting told about streaming services, is that they have to keep on making new original content because the streaming service is what have you always done for me lately? And I am not that mentality. I'm like, give me some old standard library stuff that I haven't caught up on yet. And I'm perfectly happy digging and finding, like, do you have this? I haven't watched this in a while. But once again, it's just, I am not someone else, and someone else wants something else from their entertainment. So I'm not going to berate the idea of, cool, I got new stuff. It's just, it was like a week ago, I literally was watching a Netflix movie from 3 years ago because I finally got around to it. But it's always there. And I think that's another thing to think about is these streaming services, is that they made this, but they made it because then it will always be there. It'll always be something that someone can go and watch.
Like the crab salad at a Sizzler. It's always been there, so you just don't know how long.
That was good. No, I'm with you too, Scott. Like I'm definitely the person that is going to look for things that even are not new, but like I'm loving the fact that Hulu has added a whole section of like old BBC stuff.
Oh, yes.
Like I'm like, give me Mighty Boosh any day. Give me Black Books. Give me all of that stuff.
You gotta watch yourself some Miranda. That's where it's
okay.
at. That's really fun.
Okay. But yeah, so I'm that kind of person too. But I also think that sometimes, to oppose you a little bit, Matt, just for a minute, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Is sometimes you get a little overwhelmed, I think, with dramatic content, and you need a palate cleanser.
Sure,
and this is like a palate cleanser.
Sure. Yeah. I think part of what I was trying to say too is just the overwhelming amount of things. Like you then just, it's hard to remember and or find things that got released. Like I realized a few months back, I never watched Daredevil season 3 because it just got lost in the, content ether. And so, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to find some time to watch that. I've heard good things about it.
It's amazing, and you owe it to yourself.
Yes.
Especially after the awful season 2. So, it's, well, except for the whole part with the Punisher, which was amazing. Anyway, it's, again, that's just kind of what I was thinking more, in terms of that as well. It's just, it's so easy to also miss the quality because there is just so much that's getting thrown at you, and you just like, there's so many things to choose from, you kind of miss the good stuff sometimes. So, and I mean, you both make great points in the fact that it's always there, well, hopefully for the most part, and then you can go back and watch it later. So I was going to ask both of you about this, because this movie was kind of rife with some needle drops, and, and we get a soundtrack here, but I don't really remember it. So I remembered more the fact that we used like popular music, like the Beastie Boys and whatnot. And so how did you guys like that? Did it work for you? Did you like it? Do you feel like it added to the movie? Did you like the music choices?
I feel like I love all of the music separate from this movie. But the way that the songs that were recognizable were used in this movie felt out of place to me. Like the way that Sabotage by Beastie Boys was used in the Star Trek movie, totally awesome. It was a pinnacle moment, and they were literally going up against the man, and it made sense. But here, it was like, he's getting in the car, and he immediately crashed it. I don't understand. You know what I mean?
I'm going to be completely honest. Soundtrack, Needle Drop, made absolutely no impression on me whatsoever. I couldn't tell you what was playing musical-wise in this movie. It literally passed me by. Like, that is how oblivious I was to the soundtrack of this film.
Not even Ed Sheeran?
Literally, the only thing that makes him as fact is that they said his name and he was on screen. Like, that's as far as that goes. And I'm going to be frankly honest. I've heard the name. I've seen the face. I don't keep up with popular music, like contemporary popular music. So it's like, I have heard of you. Your name has floated around in the social medias. That's as far as it went. And honestly, that bit was funny. I thought that his bit at the end, I was entertained, so, but other than that, no, like it made no impression on me whatsoever that I couldn't even tell you there were needle drops in the movie. Like that's how oblivious I was.
Yeah. I like that what both of you have said, because I do think that that's one of the places where those type of things, whether it's a soundtrack or needle drops, that can elevate a film. And I agree with both of you in the sense that, like, I didn't love the way that a lot of the songs that they used, because maybe they just either felt super obvious or just didn't work well enough for the scene. And then, when you don't really have a soundtrack that stands out at all, none of this is helping kind of like bring the movie more to life to me, which is it in the way that like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? The music that James Gunn chooses in both of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies works really, really well. I wish I could use the Suicide Squad as that example, but I can't because it's not good.
See, I would completely and utterly disagree with you because as I hold the vinyl that I bought from Mondo because I actually really enjoyed it. And
yeah, I wish I enjoyed that movie, but But my point stands. Like, you have one that really works, right?
Whatever works for your taste, there are examples of you saw the movie and the movie compelled you to want to go and buy the soundtrack. Even if the soundtrack is a mixtape soundtrack, there was something about the mix of songs. It stood out to you. It inspired you. And there was like, I could go to iTunes or Amazon Music and just listen to the individual songs or get the albums. But no, I want to get this album with this particular selection because it spoke to me. And this is one of those that I go, there were songs in this movie.
It works well with the movie, right? Like it's like you, and that's where those people that can, really put film and song together. I mean, it's one of the things that
Edgar Wright does it so well.
Yeah, he does as well. I was thinking too, one of the popular things about the original few seasons of Grey's Anatomy, like first 4 or 5 seasons, were the ways in which the music was utilized in the show, and that they did it so well, it actually catapulted artists out into like, the people actually knowing who they were, because it became so identified with that show and the song. And, again, it's just the way in which that works. And so disappointingly for all of us here, none of that happened here in this movie, which is frustrating because I think it's one of those places that if you had done that right, you could have elevated the material. Like a good soundtrack or good mixtape soundtrack that goes along with the film can actually elevate a movie and make it feel even better than it is because the music helps kind of bring you to a whole other level. And, or I guess as they would say musically, a whole other octave. But I'm really interested for both of you then, when it comes to rating Red Notice. If we we're going to do that out of 5, I don't know. Scott, you're our guest, so what do you think that would be for you?
I rated it on Letterboxd when I first watched it. And I ended up giving it 3 Cleopatra eggs out of 5 because a 3 out of 5 means it was enjoyable. I could see myself maybe playing it again at some point down the road when it tickles my fancy, but it's also very middle of the road. I really save like a 2.5 for when it's like, yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. And like, it's like 2.5 and 3 is kind of like my meh. And this really kind of fell into there was enough in it that was not terrible that I could give it a solid 3 because it did some stuff well. I was entertained for the time that I watched it, but dang, was there just that yearning in me that was like, this could have been something more than what I watched. I'm not saying it was going to be cinema, but it could have been it could have been fun instead of just like, it was okay. And that's what it is. Like, there's that bar and this landed on, that was okay. And it could have been a 4-star. That was fun. And it wasn't, for me personally.
Yeah. No, I think that you said it very well, Scott. I am on the same page. I also give it a 3 out of 5 snap-on ties. Because I thought that was actually funny. And yeah, I mean, because, you know, if you look at it percentage-wise, that's a 60 rather than a 50 out of 100. And so I think that it's definitely better than my meter of meh, okay, whatever. But it's not the greatest movie of all time. Like, it, you know, you wouldn't say this compared with Dune. Obviously, I think Dune's better. Dune is cinema.
Yes, it is. Yes.
But this is like, you know, every once in a while you're just in the mood for, like we said, like a palate cleanser or whatever, and maybe I'll watch it again because my husband hasn't seen it yet or something. And I like the actors, you know, I think that the cast was well chosen. I just think, like we are all were saying, there are certain things that could have been done better, that would have made it more than what it was. I think the music was definitely one of them, and I'm going to throw it out there again. The drone filming style sometimes just really didn't work for me. I mean, like when they're flying around back and forth down toward them at the party is what I'm thinking of. Or, you know, flying around the cave mine shaft as they're racing the Jeeps. It just came across very low budget to me. And then combined with the bullfighting scene and stuff, I just wanted a little bit more. But it was okay.
I am going to give this 2 red dresses out of 5 because Gal Gadot in that red dress is worth 2 stars. The rest of the movie is pretty forgettable. And that's too bad. You know, I think this could have been, you know, 3-4 star film for me, but really the production value on it would have had to been much higher. And I think they would have had to try a lot harder with the script. And the director, I think, would have needed to challenge. And this is the same director who did, you know, Skyscraper or whatever with Dwayne Johnson, which wasn't terrible. Much better movie than I thought it was going to be. But you know, yeah, I mean, you know, he's good at we're just kind of ripping off better films, and you know that's not great. And so this film just didn't really work for me, but I did have fun watching Gal Gadot. So I will give it 2 out of 5 red dresses. But it is time now for some recommendations. So if you wanted to recommend something good, Scott, to the listeners, what would you recommend?
Well, right now, as I'm looking at the clock going, my wife is going to kill me because we are totally ready to start season 3 of Yellowstone. We have finally started that show. I know it's currently in its 4th season, but we subscribe to Peacock, another streaming service, so that we could start binging that. And we have just torn through 2 seasons in literally 2 weeks. And if someone had told me that this was The Godfather with cowboys, I would have been on this 4 years ago when it started. But Kevin Costner and it's written and co-created by Taylor Sheridan, which if you like the Sicario movies or Hell or High Water or Wind River, I mean, literally everything this man does, I love. So the fact that it took me this long to even start Yellowstone is frankly embarrassing. And it is incredible. So that's some TV that I think you could even watch season 4 on Hulu. So, you know, spread out your streaming service love. So that's a TV show I'd highly recommend. Book-wise, I'm going to throw in a little literature. I am currently reading The Last Shadow by Orson Scott Card, which if you are a Enderverse fan, I love Ender's Game and all the subsequent books and multiple series that Orson Scott Card has created since the 80s. This is the book that finally ends it all. The Ender series, the Shadow series that followed Bean, if you are familiar. Basically, he's written a book. It just came out a week ago that takes these two series and their timelines finally, after all these years, collide. And this is like the capstone to the entire universe. So I'm really enjoying that. And it's a great sci-fi series, and I've loved it for years. And I'm just excited to kind of finally be reading the end.
The end of Ender's Game?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I actually, is there a movie for
There
that?
is a movie. It was okay. I don't hate it.
I think I saw the movie. I'm familiar with it, at least.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, there was one of those interesting things, like between book 1 and book 2, there was a 3,000-year time jump. So.
Oh, that's
a big one. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to recommend just a TV show, but I'm kind of excited because for the first time I've gotten into something new, and it's because my husband introduced me to it. I'm like, this is really good. I am hesitant sometimes when it's something I've never even consumed a little bit of, but I started watching with him the 1990s anime Cowboy Bebop.
Yes.
And I'm not usually an anime person either, but there you go. It's really good. And honestly, apparently it's regarded as one of the best anime of all time, if not the best. The music for that, speaking about music again, is perfect. The intro music to every episode is like classic spy music. Like think about the music from The Incredibles, Matt. It's just like that. But a little more jazzy. So yeah, anyway, I'm really enjoying it. Steve Bloom voices a character named Spike, who's like the lead guy. So there's another Star Wars reference for you. So yeah, I recommend checking out Cowboy Bebop, the anime.
Nice. Well, I saw they just did that movie on Netflix. Speaking of a Netflix movie, which, but that's really cool. So where are you watching it?
I think on Hulu.
It is on Hulu.
Okay.
Yeah, you can stream it on Hulu.
Yep.
Nice. I'm going to recommend to everybody a show that I have been watching, and I'm in its second season, and we're actually going to cover it next week, so I figure it's a good recommend, but I hate to give it away, but I'm enjoying Lock and Key Season 2, and we're going to be talking about it next week, so I definitely recommend that everybody start watching it so they're ready for our episode, and I'm sure lots of people have probably already seen it because it's been out for a few weeks now as well, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you go into a season and you get that sophomore slump, and I'm not feeling that so far, and I am halfway through the season, so but who knows? Next week could be a totally different ball game, so you'll have to check out the episode then. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us again. We love that we got to have you back, and we can't wait to have you back again. But let everybody know where they can find you and follow you and see what else you've got going on.
Well, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at ScottDC27. You can listen to my show, the DC Squadcast. Yes, that is a new name again. But hey, we roll with the times, and that can be found wherever podcasts can be found. We're also on Vero, Facebook, YouTube, and you can find the entire network of shows at squadcastmedia.com. This is something new that started since the last time I was on here. You can also find me every Saturday night over at the Film Junkie YouTube channel, where I'm one half of Batman the Fanimated stream, as we are going through and discussing every single episode of Batman the Animated Series.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, we just before Thanksgiving, we just did Mad as a Hatter was our last episode, and Dreams in Darkness is our next episode.
I need to go back through and watch them all anyway, so
yeah, we're doing them in production order. So
nice. That's awesome. Well, I will tell you can find me, Christy, as well on Facebook and I'll say Instagram and Twitter first at Bespin Bell, and then also on Facebook. I'm sometimes hanging out in the Babel Conference. And when I'm not here, I also do a show with my friends Amanda and Teresa called Sabers and Spells, where we talk about geeky stuff we don't usually get to cover. So I hope you'll check that out as well on the Skywalking Through Neverland network, Skynet.
And you could find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02, including, I like that you mentioned Scott Vero, even though I am just a humble, lowly, normal Vero user where I know you on Vero are verified, so... which is pretty awesome, man. Which it's a great platform. I wish more people use it because it really is I really enjoy it. So I would recommend that to anyone if you're looking for kind of a more streamlined and honestly nicer to use platform. Where it's much easier to control who sees what you like to see. Anyway, this is not a Vero commercial, but I'm just saying more people should use it. You could also find me here on the network doing so many shows. I've got, of course, Snyder Cuts as well as Assembling Avengers here with John Mills in the network. In the feed here at the 602 Club. So if you're subscribed to this show, you'll get those shows as well. And of course, doing Literary Treks, The Orb, and Warp 5 here on the network. So Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. Warp 5 is about Star Trek Enterprise, and The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And then, of course, over on the Nerd Party Network, did Owl Post with Drea Kaufman about Harry Potter, which is a show where we walked through every single chapter of that series, one chapter at a time. And then you can find me over there with John Mills on Aggressive Negotiations as we talk about Star Wars each and every week. But thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?
Mm-hmm.